Chapter 29. Home? The plane Reginald had ordered didn't arrive until the sun was starting to bob down behind the mountains, painting everything orangey pink. It was a bit of a battered old thing, a cargo plane like the one Edith had borrowed, but not quite as ropey. The pilot was another undercover BUM agent, and was a bit disappointed to find out she wouldn't be flying on a daring rescue mission, but she cheered up when Mr. Penguin gave her his best beaky grin. Earlier, whilst they'd waited for the plane, Mr. Penguin and the gang had enjoyed the village of Schneedorf-on-the-Peak without having to worry about dangerous missions or sneaky, sinister people creeping around corners. And the new Dr. Mesmero had turned out to be an absolute hoot. After she'd spent a couple of hours poring over the ancient blueprints for the Von Klonker clock with Lyle, she'd insisted that everyone join her outside to build a snowman. Mr. Penguin hadn't been keen on the idea at first. He'd been extremely busy sitting by the warm oven, wrapped up in a pile of blankets with his eyes closed, whilst his feet soaked in a bowl of warm, soapy water. But once he'd been dragged outside, he really enjoyed himself. The snowman building had turned into a snowball fight. And that had turned into a new game called, Oh, Where Has Gordon Gone? Really, Mr. Penguin, you must be careful with your snowballs. Gordon had been found safe and well, and was soon happily back on Edith's head. You could never tell with Gordon, because he was always so brave in the face of mild peril and absolute danger, but Mr. Penguin thought his friend seemed glad to be out of his hamster costume and back into the bobble hat Helga had given him. When the plane arrived and it was time to board, Mr. Penguin felt very muddled. He was, of course, very excited to get back to Cityville. His cosy igloo was waiting for him, as was the popular Place 24-hour diner with its never-ending supply of fish finger sandwiches. But he did feel a bit sad to be leaving his new friends. Lyle, Dieter, Helga, and Dr. Mesmero, now she wasn't trying to take over the world, had been so nice to the adventurers. I promise we'll soon be back, Mr. Penguin said, just before he waddled onto the plane, but this time for a holiday. Helga handed him a great hamper of food for the journey. Promise? She said. Mr. Penguin nodded. On my last fish finger sandwich. A few minutes later, the plane was soaring above the clouds towards Cityville. In the back, Edith and Gordon were already dozing. Colin was upside down, fast asleep, whilst holding up his notepad, which said, Zzz. But Mr. Penguin couldn't get comfortable. Despite the yummy picnic from Helga, his stomach was still grumbling. He knew what would stop it rumbling, but of course, up in the air, there wasn't a fish finger sandwich to be found. Just a load of cardboard boxes on their way to the shops of Cityville. Wait a minute! What was that? Mr. Penguin scanned back over the labels. Walter Trout's luxury fish paste? Could it be true? An entire box of fish paste here on the plane? He knew it was naughty, but his flippers had a mind of their own, and he found himself ripping open the box. He gasped. Inside there was jar after jar of the stuff, just waiting to be gobbled up. Surely whoever it was for wouldn't mind him having one or two. Mr. Penguin popped open one of the lids and stuck his entire beak into the jar. It was scrumptious. It was delicious. It was... He heard someone clearing their throat politely. Mr. Penguin turned to find Reginald Spyglass standing in the door to the cockpit. Behind him, the pilot was fiddling with some dials. Bit of a change of plan, old chap, Reginald said, trying not to stare at the jar stuck on Mr. Penguin's beak. A message just came through for you on the radio. Someone is requesting your help with an urgent matter. We're going to have to divert the plane. Mr. Penguin sighed. His fish finger sandwich at the diner in Cityville would have to wait. Another exciting adventure was calling. The end. Until the next time.